We may be live, maybe not. So far, we have a great connection according to YouTube. And are we live? Yes, I think we're actually live, and I don't have to click anything else. I love it. I love it when websites change things just randomly.
That's something to
It's just fun.
Yes. So, yeah, we're live. People have just heard us nervously rambling. When I say us, I mean me. Hello and welcome to our Changeling live stream this month. And of course, it's October. It's going to get spooky. And we are having an auction on Monday. It's called Something Wicked because that's what all our art is, just wicked little things that want to go into your home and do strange things while you sleep with your furniture. Anyways, we're going to tell you some spooky stories today and talk about our biggest fears. And I want to stop talking now. So, Madalyn, why don't you introduce yourself and your cat and what you're doing?
Okay. Yeah, first of all, most importantly, this is my cat. Her name is Mariya, and she likes to have her tail in my face all the time lately, so she'll probably keep being here. But my name is Madalyn McLeod, and I draw fantasy art. I'm based out of Asheville, North Carolina. My website is madalynmcleod.com. It's MADALYNMCLEOD. And I'm drawing mostly nature fae right now, not really focusing on the spooky stuff this year, but I like the spooky stuff, so I'm interested to see what we're going to be talking about here.
Me too. Mariya, what about you? Who are you, mysterious figure? And what's your art about?
the very pale, mysterious figure on the camera. Well, my name is Mariya Prytula. I'm I'm a children's illustrator. I do venture into fantasy because I think a lot of children's illustration essentially is going to be fantasy. I specialize in water-based media. And then, let's see, since Madalyn gave her website, she was all like pro about it. My website is mv Prytula, Prytula.com. So, yeah, and I'm from Austin, Texas. But I love Asheville. Asheville's so pretty. You guys have such awesome mountain folklore there.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of the best time of year right now, too, and the leaves are just fully in color. It's really great right now.
I'm jealous.
So, speaking of mountain folklore, I've promised people spooky stories. So, who wants to start? Mariya, you said you had a short and sweet one for the beginning.
So I love spooky stories, but I think it does really get really awkward telling them on camera and just talking. So I'll just say one that happened to my husband and I. And the type of spooky stories I usually like are ordinary life ones. So something that can obviously happen to you any day of the year. Rather than something necessarily magical, I'm definitely more of an ordinary magic kind of person. So we were driving from Houston to Waco, I believe. And this is back probably about eight years ago now. We've had one of those old GPSs before everything got built into your phones, and still prior to those days. And we're driving through, and it's already probably close to midnight because we're obnoxious and we drive really late at night. And we're already tired. We just turned onto this highway going into Austin. And all of a sudden the GPS goes, in 100 feet, turn right onto Cemetery Road. And we've also been talking about, I think, like Friday the 13th right before, right? So very appropriate. And to my surprise, my husband goes, okay, so he's turning into the Cemetery Road. And the road just changes. It goes from the highway to really, really kind of cobbly. And the fog comes out too. And at this point, I'm freaking out. I'm like, oh my God, turn back, turn back, turn back. Don't go down the cemetery road. What the heck are you thinking? So, but, eventually we got turned around and, back to our course. But it was kind of one of those creepy moments where technology doesn't mess up too much. So I wonder if there was something spooky going on or somebody really was messing with the radio waves. But yeah, it happened. So hopefully my husband won't turn onto the cemetery road next time.
A haunted GPS.
Ghost.
I think it was definitely a ghost.
Definitely. So, Madalyn, what do you have for us today?
Well, mine isn't from my personal life like that. It's just a story that I liked. I really like spooky stories that are not so easily dismissed. Like, I'm usually a more skeptical person about that type of thing. So I'm more interested in the ones where it's like there are these places in the world that have paranormal happenings being reported just pretty much consistently, and it's like, what is happening? Have you ever heard of the Bridgewater Triangle?
I don't think so.
It's this place in Massachusetts where there are sightings of ghosts and UFOs and Bigfoot and just all kinds of things are reported there just all the time. And everyone knows that if you go out into the wilderness in that area, you're kind of going in at your own risk because people report things like just floating orbs of fire, orbs of light, hearing voices out in the trees, that kind of thing. And there's Native American folklore in the area too that has been used to explain some of it. Like there are these floating balls of light that just get seen all the time. And what's supposed to be happening there is there's this little troll type creature called a puckwudgie. And it basically uses the light like it's bait, and it lures people into the woods to kill them. And they're usually just associated with the lights, but there is this man named Bill who had a really weird experience one night going out into the woods. He worked the late shift, so he just happened to had to work his day around an unusual schedule, and so he would always walk his dog in the middle of the night. And usually he would just stick to the sidewalks in the town, like where the lights are, nice and easy. But for some reason on this particular day, he decided to just walk straight out into the woods, right where all the strange things are happening. And at first it was fine, but once they were deep into the woods, his dog started freaking out. And, animals sense things faster than we do sometimes. So his dog was just like whimpering and crying and pulling on the leash to go back, but they were just in pretty deep now. And they started hearing this voice that was just like making nonsense sounds just coming from out in the darkness somewhere. And it was saying, "Iwan Chu," just like repeating that over and over, "Iwan Chu." And it's like, what does that mean? But there wasn't really anywhere to go at this point. They were just out surrounded by darkness. But he said that this 2-foot furry little man walked out of the woods, and it fit the description of a puckwudgie. And it just kept saying, "Iwan Chu, here, here," and getting louder. And it was like beckoning for him to follow into the woods. And Bill even tried to speak to it for a while, but it wouldn't say anything but "Iwan Chu, here." And after a little while of this, Bill just walked back home and didn't turn back or anything, but he kept thinking about it for the rest of the night, and he thought that the thing was trying to speak English to him, and it was trying to say, "We want you. Come here." And that's the end.
That is creepy. I might be an illustrator who does horror, but I don't like creepy. That's too much for me.
Oh, I like it.
Thank you. I just like the idea of, like, we don't normally think of fae type things trying to mimic human speech. That was just not one I'd really heard before.
I think I read enough Charles Dillon.
You what?
Words. I read enough Charles Dillon, where that's a pretty common element that he uses.
I don't think
Oh, I love it. I think he won, was it World Fantasy Award last year?
Okay.
Yeah. But lots of really fantasy. You told that story so well. I liked it.
Thanks. I wish I had one for my own life. I guess I haven't really had that many things.
Have you been to Franklin in North Carolina? So it's only an hour and a half from you.
Been to where?
Franklin, North Carolina.
I think that's a place I've driven past, but I haven't really stayed.
So they have a haunted house, like a legit haunted house.
Yeah.
During one of the art retreats with, I think, a couple of people from Changeling maybe also, we went on this haunted tour. So, which is pretty generic. You start out, we went to a museum at night and explored the upstairs there, which was it was creepy. I mean, I'm afraid of the dark, so I was like, something just got
I know sometimes too.
Oh, I'm worse. Goodness. One time I had to work. Oh, here I go on detours. One time I had to work first aid at a haunted house, and I threw it. Oh my god. Some of the spooks actually had to point me which way to go because I just got so freaked out.
Oh.
But back to Franklin, so there is a haunted house there, and we went there on this ghost tour. And you can go there during the day. It's blocked off. It doesn't have, you actually cannot rent it anymore for business or private home because it's so haunted. And they actually have a sign there that, hey, if you want this house, you can go ahead and transport it. We'll give it to you for free. You can take it away from this town and bring it to your land. And of course, the guy tell what kind of supernatural stuff happened there and stuff like that. But the coolest thing for me is as soon as we went up to that house, the fireflies started coming out of the ground. Ooh. And it was such a magical experience, the haunted house and all the stories, and then all of a sudden, like these bursts of light coming through. That was so cool.
Fireflies add so much. To any setting, just 10 times magic.
That sounds so beautiful. I mean, you say a haunted house and all, but that's just, it sounds so beautiful, so romantic in a way, so magical.
It was very pretty, and it was also, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Southern, like American Southern architecture. So it definitely was not a plantation. It was definitely a kind of a poorer people's home. Obviously not a poor people's home because they still had a home. But it was like a lower income housing, shiplap on the outside. It did have 2 floors, but the windows were really small upstairs. Yeah, I mean, even if they didn't have, kind of that haunted story to it, even when you came through it, I think you'd just be a little you'd definitely notice. But there wasn't anything wasn't a Victorian mansion, but there was just something slightly extraordinary about it, and that was really interesting.
Sounds so cool. Okay, so I think that's good when it comes to spooky stories. I want to know your deepest, darkest fears. That was enough chit chat, getting the mood right. So, Madalyn, what's your darkest fear and how have you overcome it or how are you dealing with it?
My biggest fear when it comes to art or just in general?
Whatever you want to talk about. I think art might be most interesting to the people watching, but maybe not. Maybe they want to know all about your personal life. Who knows?
I guess it's always hard to narrow it down to just one thing because it's more complicated than that usually. But as an artist, the things I tend to think about is that I worry that my art won't touch people the way I want it to. Like they'll get some totally different vibe from it than what I'm going for, or something like that, or that it will be forgettable. So that's something that I think about in the back of my mind sometimes, and mostly try to not think about it and just focus on doing the work that speaks to me, and then trusting that if I put my heart into it, it'll probably show through, and people will connect with that somehow. And even if it's not exactly the way I was expecting them to be touched by it, it's actually fine. Like once you put something out into the world, it can kind of take on its own life and its own meanings for different people, and it's better to be okay with that type of thing.
Yeah, it's out of your control once you send it out there into the world, but it also becomes more somehow like some kind of different creature than what you intended, and there's something really beautiful in it as well.
It can definitely be really cool. Like sometimes people tell me the meanings they see in my work, and it's every now and then it's not something that was going through my mind at all. Maybe even like slightly contradictory, but it's still interesting to see that like everyone's seeing things through their own lens, and it can kind of take on a magical quality in that way at the same time.
Definitely. So Mariya, fears, or do you want to contribute to this discussion? You have a choice.
Well, I think this year has definitely brought forth many of the fears that people have had into reality. So it seems a little almost shallow, to talk about our personal career fears, because a lot of people have, been in best case scenario, had their life turned upside down this year. I remember what was it, 2016, 2020. We were like, oh, go away. But I think for me, on the kind of personal career level, I think I would not want to fizzle out or become dated. I do want to have a long career within the arts and the illustration. And I think my fear is staying kind of static and not being able to adapt and change. Because there definitely, after a certain time, every decade, and I would say almost every 5 years of illustration, you can almost pinpoint something was created. There's those certain looks where it stays the same, and a lot of times I've had people say about my artwork, it's vintage. And I'm like, oh, that is not necessarily a good term to say that goes along, with my fears. Because the last thing I want to be is necessarily, vintage and dated. I do believe in, good craftsmanship, and I do specialize in watercolor. And there aren't too many people, I guess, these days who do that. So that's the immediate association that they have. And so I think that's probably one of my work fears. Other than deadlines, no, I'm never afraid of deadlines. Deadlines are fine.
Deadlines are great. They help you plan ahead and plan your life. They're good. Deadlines are good.
Deadlines are wonderful.
Yeah, but I understand this fear to be outdated in a way and kind of be left behind by everybody else and not progressing. It's like all these dreams where you're kind of trying to run but you can't, or you're hovering and you can't fly and so on. You're just kind of stuck. And I think that's just as scary in real life. I also think that even if there's a lot of horrible stuff coming true right now for a lot of people, still your own fears about your career or your life are still valid. It's just a different level, and once you start to compare fears and anxieties, it just gets to this giant mess, because there'll always be people who have it worse. It's like, even right now there's a lot of stuff coming true for a lot of us, because now we have this pandemic, and I don't know what you have going on in the US anymore. It just sometimes I take a peek and go, oh no.
No, it's okay.
Yeah. And but it has been just as bad in other parts of the world, or even worse, all along, even when we were still kind of coasting on everything being kind of okay. So I don't know, it's just everybody has something going on at any time, and it's important. If it's important to you, it has some importance. Even if somebody might be listening going, I have it worse. Well, that's sad for the person who has it worse, but it doesn't invalidate your own feelings and fears.
I think when my friends ask me, like, now, like, how are you? Even with family, I'm like, stable. Stable is a very good and very positive word right now. So, yeah. Because I think, I'm Ukrainian. Yana, you're from Poland, right?
Germany.
Germany. Oh, okay. Gotcha. For some reason, I thought you were in Poland. But, in Ukraine, whenever people ask, like, oh, how are you? They really want to know how you are. Versus in the States, it's more of like a conversation starter.
I never thought it was anything besides, like, the thing you say fine to.
Yeah. It's the same here.
Versus in Ukraine, like, if somebody asks you, how are you? Especially, I'm from the southern city of Odessa, which is right on the Black Sea, where we're southern, we're talk, we had a huge Jewish population in the city, so a lot of, like, habits that are in New York, they come from my side. So whenever people ask me, like, how are you? I always have to stop myself from, like, unloading everything. So
that's a question I've been trying to stop asking people so much lately, because it's like, for people who are used to just saying fine, it's almost kind of like I can see it in their eyes that it's like, I'm not fine, really.
But that's why I think, like, stable is such a good word, because it's okay, there are bad things, but I'm finding, like, something okay to look at as well. Obviously I have a roof over my head, very lucky in that regard. So yeah, I like that word.
A mixed bag of experiences in life. Now it just happens to be more negative ones than usual, but there's usually still good.
There is, and I think that's one of those where you're acknowledging the negative and you're acknowledging the positive, but it's not like you're not ranking, oh, this one's better today than the other. Like, we're chill. So.
That sounds like a super healthy approach. Can't just kind of ignore all the bad stuff, but like just balancing it out. It sounds good.
There's stuff, yeah. So.
Oh, this actually reminds me of something that happened earlier this year that actually was kind of weird. Talking about the state of the world right now, the last trip that I ever took before everything changed in March was I went to visit my brother at school, and he brought me out into the woods and showed me this abandoned life-size statue of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And that's the last thing I saw before everything.
Madalyn, what have you done? Geez,
I
that's all
feel
your
about
fault.
them. I don't know if they're mad at me or what, but it was definitely real weird. But it was like the week before, I think, everything changed. And it was at a college, and I've been sworn to secrecy on the location. Because the students there made it this whole thing that they challenged freshmen to go out into the woods and find the horseman statue in the middle of the night, which sounds really fun. But they were just like these life-size statues.
Really fun.
I mean, fun in a way, fun for like memories. But yeah, I don't know if they. I just keep picturing them having gotten loose as soon as I left.
You broke the seal.
Whoops.
Hair keeps twisting.
Anyway, that's just a side note.
Brought upon us. Fun.
They could have been just on their way out anyway.
Probably were.
I don't believe it.
Okay, let's talk about nice things. Not that the four horsemen of the apocalypse are nice.
You talk about scary stories in the first place.
Yeah, I realized that it was a bad idea. Look, I'm not a genius. Sometimes I think I want something and then I get it and it's like, no, let's talk about art instead, okay? I want to see your art. I'm sure it's going to be. Wait, it's a creepy themed auction. Maybe I don't want to see your art. Okay.
Pull out a kitten again to lighten your mood.
Don't confuse me.
Hannah, you can invite me for a Christmas special because I feel like I need you to make it up to me.
Christmas. Yeah, I think I was talking to the last panel. We were talking about having a Christmas special with wine. So a day drinking Christmas special. Although for me it's the evening, so that's fine. Yeah, it's just having a cozy, a beautiful little round for Christmas. Because we'll all be alone on Christmas and stuck in our homes and not visiting families and so on. Yeah. Anyways, good things. Art. Show me. Who wants to start?
Oh, I've got mine right here.
Yeah, perfect.
So one of the things I have in the auction is a limited edition G-Play of this Medusa piece.
Oh, I love this piece.
Thank you.
So beautiful.
You can't. I'm sure the embellishments don't show up on screen, but
It does a little bit.
What?
It does a little bit. I love her hands.
Thank you. I love really using that. I don't know how to describe it. The darkness at the end of the fingers is an effect I keep using. I'm not really sure why. It's just it looks so cool. But I like that people have been talking about Medusa in a more positive sense lately, as that she's really a victim more than a villain, which is it's just what her backstory is, that she's been cursed unfairly. So this piece is about her kind of making peace with her situation, and or at least what little bit that she can. And it's very melancholy and everything, but I try to focus on showing her humanity in this painting. So yeah, just limited edition G-Plays of these with little metallic embellishments in the scales.
So beautiful. I love the snakes. And so friendly and yeah. Mariya.
Nice piece.
Yeah, definitely. Mariya, do you have art in the auction?
I do. I'm putting in a token piece. No, just kidding. Since I was here. So it's an illustration that I created for a private property that's being completed right now. And it's about, it's essentially about greed. And this queen gets cursed uh, with the gold. And of course, it's kind of about falling under the spell of money and how it can transform you. So, which is, I think, once again, it's coming back to a lot of the problems that we have now. But I do, I don't know, I like hands also.
Yeah, the gesture is really nice.
Mm-hmm. So you still have life in there, but it's already taking over. So.
Oh, so deep. Guys, you had so many thoughts for your pieces. I actually have art in the auction as well. I know people and this watching the stream won't really be able to see a lot, but it's my first 2 months of fear pieces. I mean, they're pretty high contrast, so maybe.
Mm-hmm. I can see that one better.
Yeah. Anyways, they can see it on the internet if they want to. They can see it when they go and check out the auction on Monday. There'll be good photographs. I was just kind of, with the month of fear pieces this month, because I don't have that much time, I tried to have some more abstract, fragmented artworks that kind of all work together and just kind of showcase some elements from the themes, and just something a little bit more experimental, and I really like how it's turning out, and you better buy those pieces. I will be disappointed. Because I always want a home for my art, because I'm the worst home for my own art, because I just put everything into a folder and then it's just sleeping away somewhere. It's never
that is so true. And that's actually good if you put it in a folder. Because sometimes it's just like all over the place. Or I'm very lucky that my dog doesn't step on any of the stuff that ends up being on the floor. I got very lucky. I don't know what I did to deserve lucky. But yeah, I'm definitely not a very good home for art as well. But I do try to keep things safe, but occasionally, stuff happens. But that's why sleeves are such a great thing to have and put your artwork into whenever it's done.
But you need so many of them. It's much easier to just kind of stack them and put them into a simple folder and then just put it away and hope there's still space somewhere.
Otherwise, we just wouldn't have any room in our home if we were to display every single piece that we. So, and so I've actually really enjoyed not just having not any art in my home, but we moved last year in August. And I actually really enjoyed not having any art on my walls for the longest time, because it was like, especially because I do have some pieces that I've created that I love, but like I needed a break from them. And it's also a little morbid, like to have your own thoughts shown back to you for like eternity. Like it's kind of weird. So
I think I know what you mean. I don't put that much of my own art up in our house. Partly because it's weird to keep looking at it forever, and partly because you kind of need a break from seeing things to see the flaws in it later. And I find that it's a little bit easier to grow if you aren't constantly looking at it all the time.
Yeah, the pieces that I do like hanging up are my unfinished ones, because then you just kind of end up thinking like you don't have a finished thought already like captured in time and reflecting back into you. So like those two over there, there we go. So not finished, but I like the way they balance. And then whenever I'm taking a break from work, it's always fun to look into it and like see shapes and see different compositions, and it changes all the time depending on the mood too. So much more interesting that way.
I think when I was in art school, I heard one of my teachers talk about some guy. I think he was a famous painter, but I'm calling him the guy now because I don't know who it was. Who had different colored walls and would put his unfinished paintings on one and then move it to the next one when it was done. So you could always look at it and kind of move it on depending on how he was feeling and how the process was coming along. That kind of reminds me of what we were saying about keeping your unfinished artwork kind of
frozen. Looks
in your
like
view.
He sounds like he was more during the designer.
Is it me that's frozen or is it them that's frozen?
I think it's you that's frozen. I think Madalyn froze. It's the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
Yeah, one of them is bad internet connection.
One of them definitely is bad internet connection.
That's
so
the
good.
modern. It's the modern horseman.
I'd love to see it. But yeah, no, I think I think unfinished artwork is underrated. And that's probably why we really like to see other artists' sketchbooks, because then we kind of get to see the thoughts as they form rather than ones that are end capped. Because essentially when something is unfinished, it's still full of possibilities. And that's what's interesting, because you haven't taken that very last decision and said, and we're done. So.
Hi, sorry about that.
No problem.
Issues.
We have 2 of you now. Double of fun.
I'll say that's kind of creepy. Oh, that was because you would have turned into twin versions of yourselves. So the frozen Madalyn and the living one, definitely theme appropriate.
Very intentional.
Yeah. Okay,
Madalyn, do you read any of the stories from your region of the Smokies?
Sorry, say that again?
Do you read any of the haunted stories from your region of the Smokies?
Not that much. I know when I first moved here, I read some of those things, but I don't really remember any that well. Most of the time, it's not really been my focus, so.
We picked it up a couple of years ago.
Mountain ghost stories.
Cool. Write that down. I might flip through it. But I really love ghost stories from specific places. In fact, a lot of times whenever I do travel, that's the kind of any kind of folklore. I love folklore, and I end up grabbing it. But what I like about this one is it has like very specific places, like Blue Ridge Mountain off of this road and this turn, turnpike 200 feet to the left. So it really places you, especially if you've been into a place, it really places you into that mental state, and it helps you visualize it so much better than like in a random town on the shadow side of the mountain.
Okay, so usually we'd start with an FAQ section now, but I think right now we don't have any audience questions yet. But if our wonderful audience has questions, may you please write them into the chat window, and we will give our best to reply. Otherwise, we can chat about creepy mountains and so on a little bit further.
I actually have one more auction piece too.
You do? Oh, then show the auction piece. Definitely. I mean, you're not just limited to one.
So I have this tapestry. I'll stand up for a little bit.
It's so big.
Yeah, it is really big. I wanted to do something with poster size, and these tapestries are really nice because they're not as delicate as just poster paper.
Mm-hmm.
But they're also pretty shiny, like the Medusa painting was.
Yeah, the print looks so good as well.
I don't think they're actually wicked like the theme, but they probably would be perceived that way by anyone who crosses them.
Well, they're coming out of the dark. I think that's wicked enough.
Yeah, they're definitely coming from like deep sea, tired of people invading their oceans and littering their seas and that type of thing.
Okay, we have audience questions. Have any of us ever met a ghost or had a creepy experience? But I think we already had that covered.
I don't think I have. One time I had a sleepover in a haunted house, or a house that was supposed to be haunted, but then the person who owned the house actually just jumped out in a costume, so I'm pretty sure she was just lying. I can't really think of a time I've ever actually thought, like, I can't explain what's happening right now in some other way. I guess there's been times I've heard things or thought I saw something out in the woods, but it could always just be the wind or something, you know?
So
I know. There's just straight wilderness right behind my house, so anytime I need to go out at night for some reason, it's all about your mindset when you go out into the woods or out near the woods. Like, every little shadow is going to look like the worst possible thing. Every little sound is going to be like, was that a voice? And so I've had experiences that felt spooky to me at the time, but then always later it's like, oh, that was actually, I was just in a weird mindset. So that's me.
And for anybody who's not from the States or has never been to Asheville, North Carolina, that area is a temperate rainforest. So Madalyn lives in like one of the most beautiful places on earth, in my opinion.
No big deal.
So it's just so lush and so pretty. Yeah. For me, I haven't had any spooky experiences. It always, kinds of stories that come to you through secondhand. In Ukraine, we do have a bit of folklore in regards to, like brownies in home, like house spirits or something like that. It's very much mixed. Eastern Orthodox with, whatever religions were before them. So many folk superstitions, So I do have a lot of that embedded in me. But somebody's always in my bosses. And some of the superstitions usually, like, if you can't find something, you just have to like yell, and then the brownie will get scared and so it'll drop it, and then you'll find it. So that's what I'm sometimes doing. If I really like, if I searched high and low and it's not coming up, I'll do it, and then so just those kinds of things.
we might have some of those as well. But I haven't known about the shouting yet, so I'll try that when I'm missing. When I can't find my glasses again, which happens.
My thing is usually to ask my husband to help me find them. But it's other things as well. I think glasses are more self-explanatory. Some of the other ones, like, really, how to get over here? But another one also, if you're ever lost in the woods, you're supposed to switch your shoes from left and right sides of your feet, and then you're also supposed to turn your clothes inside out, and that is supposed to confuse the forest spirit, the Yeshe, and they will let you go.
That's what I'm going to tell people the next time when they wonder about why I'm wearing my clothes the wrong way around.
Well, if you ever see people stripping in the middle of the forest, that might be another reason.
That's what the naked people are doing. They're just in the process of protecting themselves from the fairies when you meet them in the forest. There's nothing weird about it.
No.
finally, I understand.
Now you understand leader quality.
Checking. No new questions. So, technically we still have 15 minutes to go. Is there anything you have on your soul that you want to talk about? Or do you want to go out and enjoy the rest of the day and be like, oh my god, 15 minutes earlier, yes, I have more time. I still have 15 minutes, so.
Do you have any questions for us?
I just wanted to know your deepest, darkest fears, so I could feed on them as I do.
Maybe we could talk about how we deal with fear.
Yes.
Let's not talk about fear anymore. I still want to have a good day once we get out of here, though.
What are you looking forward to doing today or within the next few weeks? I mean, as the world is falling apart, you know, you're supposed to be dancing in the apocalypse and so on. So what's your dancing?
I can't talk about it yet.
Semi-serious!
But I can't talk about it yet. But I am looking for a nap afterwards. I only had 4 hours of sleep, guys. I put on makeup for you, but...
So on it.
Mm-hmm.
Madalyn, what's a good...
Yeah,
What was that?
tell us your deepest and darkest fear.
Oh no, my deepest and darkest fear.
Yeah.
Well, mostly it's that my mind is going to turn against me again and everything will be horrible. Yeah, when I was in my teens, early 20s, my brain was hostile towards myself a lot. And since then I've worked a lot on my mental health and I'm basically terrified of all that work being for nothing and going back to the dark place. So I'm super sensitive to any time my brain is going, you're a piece of shit. And I'm like, no, don't do that again. We're over that. We don't do that anymore. Yeah, anyway, that's my deepest, darkest fear. And it takes managing. And I am getting better at it. But yeah, it's a long process. You never get really rid of it. But yeah, that's the darkest fear, basically. Just not being able to rely on your brain to do the right thing. Learning.
That makes sense. I've had trouble with mental health too, and it's always hard to think about losing control again.
Yeah, because you know when you're feeling better that everything your brain said was bullshit, but you also know what you did when you were feeling bad, and you're looking back and say, oh no, good thing you didn't do anything worse, but that was already pretty bad, let's not do this again. But you don't know that you won't do it again.
It always feels like the voices in your head are the absolute truth in the moment, so you have to kind of actively avoid getting yourself into that type of mindset.
Yeah. Just have to do everything to prevent that poltergeist to come back. Yeah, so we wanted to talk about happy things.
But really quick for anybody, because I found it really helpful within the last 2 years. Because, you know, we as artists, usually criticism is something that does send us down. Well, occasionally, not necessarily criticism, but any kind of feedback sometimes can take you down into a loop. And that can be anything from a client email to a comment or even like portfolio reviews. So I actually started recording almost all of them starting last, anything pretty much that I do starting last winter, which is a lot easier to do, over Zoom and etc. But last winter, just even opening up your phone and be like, okay, what are these people saying about? Because almost as soon as you're out of those situations, at least my brain starts twisting it around. So it's like, no, they really didn't mean that, or they said it a different way, or they inflected it a different way, so they really meant something completely different. And it was interesting because a couple of days ago, I was restarting a project, and I'm looking through, and as I'm working, I just have all these thoughts like, oh, the client said this and this and this, and it just gets a little obsessive. And then that thing that I was kind of fearing of the client rejecting within my work, I was rereading the email, I think 2 days ago, from them. And that was actually one of the things we're like, no, this is great. Versus my brain's already like, no, this was bad. Make sure you don't do this. So anything, and things have to be recorded basically. So.
Yeah, you have stone cold proof for your brain that it's wrong. So you know what really happens. So it's one
exactly,
thing.
And especially if you're ever pitching a story to a publisher or something like that. Oh boy, I mean, talk about insecurities coming up.
I've never done that, but that sounds really interesting. We should talk about that at some other time. I think we don't, although you can talk about this for 10 more minutes, about how you are prepared for pitching to a publisher.
I mean,
if you want
to. How I did it the first time? The very first time, because I am not a cold turkey kind. This is not cold turkey. There's a process that you go through. Some publishers accept inquiries, and the same thing with pitching an agent also. It's going to be, you're kind of throwing yourself out there. It's worse than dating. I think it's worse than dating. Dating, at least, you get a little sense of a person, versus here, you're it's kind of like dating, but you also have to be able to work together, which is good luck finding that combination. But yeah, hold on, where was I going with this? Oh, and so the very first time that I actually pitched something was, I was so anxious. I actually went to a sketch night here in Austin, and I was sitting surrounded by people, and I already had the email ready and all the attachments, and I'm sitting there 10 minutes, and I'm just I just can't press the button. So I was with a friend, I was like, "Mom," she's like, "You can do it. You can do it. Press the button. Press the button." So that's just kind of what you do. You do all the work. A lot of it ends up being, in my opinion, is tech work. If you're pitching, a picture book or something like that, you're pretty much, you have to have the whole story written, right, as an author illustrator. On top of that, you have to do all the sketches, knowing that almost everything is probably going to be changed, because every art director and every single designer, has their own story to tell as well. So here you are, creating all this work and putting it together and putting your soul into it, knowing that it would be changed anyways, and just kind of packaging it in. And the frustrating thing is, usually you can't do you stamp the most high quality files, which for an illustrator is, I don't know, probably one of the worst things you can do is attaching a super low res image or just pasting it into the body of the email. Yeah. But yeah, it's kind of weird talking about it without, this is just kind of jumping into that topic.
Ooh, I have more questions for you. How has being from the Ukraine influenced your art?
Oh, it definitely influenced the colors that I use. It's actually one of the things that with artists, you can, at least I can always pinpoint whenever an artist is from Eastern Europe, based on their line work, usually, and also based on the colors that they use. So I'm sure there are some exceptions, but by and large, it is what it is. And I think it is largely influenced by the colors that we see in folklore, but it is also largely influenced by передвижники. So the Russian movement about This is when my time periods are going to get screwed up because my sense of time is completely awful this year. I think from about 1870s, probably 1880s to like to Revolution, but some of those artists like kept creating afterwards. Yeah, and then of course, if you see something, folk art is so incredibly rich. I'm definitely more on the naturalistic aspect of things. I don't dip into folk too much yet. But there's also something in the works in regard to that.
Ah, sounds so exciting. Okay, last question. Madalyn, I haven't heard your voice for a while, your lovely voice. How much of your art is spooky versus how much isn't? So about a percentage, or whether you have periods where you do spooky art.
I would say it's pretty low. Most of my art is more on the whimsical fantasy side, but some of it has an edge to it. Like, I like to kind of put just a little bit of horror into it. Let me see if I can pull up an example here. I definitely am usually more inspired by the more sorry, I'm getting distracted. I usually keep it more on the light side, but I think some darkness is good to give it an edge.
I mean, you do a lot of nature work as well, and there's always some darkness
there. Yeah, it's mostly
there.
nature-based stuff right now, which is kind of like, I try to bring the same mindset to that I would anything, which is that there's good and bad in nature, just like anywhere else. It's more that nature is neutral, but you can experience good and bad within it. So I try to show a little bit of both. Like, I've really mostly been focusing on my Nature Fae series right now, and it's really not that dark, but it's very, very moody. Sometimes it's very melancholy, and I'm working on some pieces now that's going to be like naiads in more of a stormy waters rather than the smooth, serene, and just kind of showing the different emotional side to that. But let me pull out an example of something I've done that's a little bit more spooky than that. So I'm just going to go pull it out from my drawers over here.
Get the art.
Yeah, but I think that's something to remember also, because both Madalyn and I think I'm even more on the more kind of realistic, naturey side usually. So while we don't necessarily do spooky, I think Madalyn hit the nail on the head. We do melancholy. And even within, nature and animal sort of relationships, it really isn't, nature has to take care of itself, like the creatures within itself. The rabbit has to eat, but so does the fox. And I worked for a wildlife rescue also part-time. And yeah, those are very interesting relationships, and I think that's what a lot of nature artists end up examining is relationships really. So, but we do keep it subtle sometimes.
Yeah, and it depends on the person what people think is spooky and what isn't, right?
Yeah,
sure.
100%.
Here's an example of one of mine that has gotten different responses from different people. Like, some people think it looks like she's dying after being burned at the stake or something like that, and some people think it looks more like she's ascending to a higher plane of existence. And I like to kind of let it be sort of vague like that, where you could just read what you want into it. Yeah. And here's one that's a little bit more dark. It was from a story about a witch who had a very evil enchanted object that she could summon dark spirits out of, but it would slowly suck her soul away.
Oh, I love this one. I mean, the concept, but also the composition and the character of the evil spirity things and so on. It's just lovely.
I think that's a pretty real type of concept. Like people who sell their soul away to gain power is definitely a very current thing. Like even though this is like it's fantasy work, I like to have some realism to it, and that it seems like that's kind of the way things would happen.
Yeah, very similar to the piece that's in the auction for me this time.
Yeah.
Right, just looks different, but similar themes. Yeah, but I think that's a great point to end this. You know, seeing your lovely art, seeing your cat in the background. I'm just here to see other people's cats, really. That's why I do this. Yeah, thank you so much for talking to me today, because otherwise I wouldn't have spoken to any person or animal. Anyways, thank you everyone. What were you saying? What?
I was saying get a hamster or a mouse.
But even if I want to keep them in animal-friendly environments, they need space. I have a friend here in Berlin. She has a rescue hamster, and it's so cute. But it also has this giant cage, and it's great. The hamster is very lucky, but I don't have the space. Anyways, I wanted to thank you all and the people who are watching and asking questions that I desperately asked for. Back you for questions and you answered. Thank you. Yeah, and there'll be another chat next month, and I hope you'll all check out the auction and snap up all that beautiful art. And I hope you all have a lovely, lovely day. I'll figure out how to stop the broadcast now.